Hello, good evening, happy Sunday. This is the Burn KC ScorchCast. I am your host, Alex Blackburn, as always. And a bit since we've done the show. Fortunately, just stuff got in the way. Little thing called the AFC Championship prevented me from doing it. Prevented me from doing the show last Sunday, but luckily that turned out all right. I would say so myself. Had a pretty loaded show for you today. Going over college basketball, anywhere from the local teams to refereeing to everything like that. Just basically going over what we talked about the past couple of weeks in the articles. Then we're going to mention the Royals a little bit, talk about the Greinke re-signing, as well as certain comments made by the Royals owner himself, John Sherman. Kind of analyzing those and just kind of what it'll mean for the season. And of course, we're going to go over the Chiefs. That's obvious. We gotta. As a KC Sports podcast, I really don't think not going over the Chiefs. Yes, I know I used a double negative there. I don't care. But not going over the Chiefs would be kind of a sin right now. So we'll be going over them. We'll be going over the current, and we'll be going over the Blues as well. And stay tuned until the outro. You'll hear the special Super Bowl announcement that I have. So let's strap in and get started. Going to be a good show. So, also, I'd like to add apologies for the voice. It's kind of a little rusty right now. I am having some allergy problems that I'm currently remedying. It is that time of year for me, unfortunately. But we're cruising. We're doing all right. I'm feeling good. And yeah, let's just get the show started. Let's just shut up and talk, shall we? Anyway, college basketball. Plenty of ups and downs for the local teams as of recent. Whether it be K-State, KU, or Mizzou, they've all had either their triumphs or their slumps these past couple of weeks. Let's go ahead and start with K. Let's go ahead and start with K-State. I first want to address. Excuse me. I first want to address the Jerome Tang comments that were made earlier this week regarding KU and K State's history pre 1988. Um, I'm a KU alum. I'm a KU basketball guy through and through. I think these comments were taken out of context. Um, it's it's hard to determine because media does what they do. I mean, I'm media as well. They kind of sprinkle in that little bit of opinion, that little bit of a context, uh, cherry picking, if you will. And this is no different. I think a lot of the pro KU media was on Jerome Tang about this one, and taken out of context, absolutely, they are right. Basically, what Jerome Tang said was, let me actually quote it for you. Give me a sec. Give me just a second. I should have had this prepared, shouldn't I have? But we're gonna get there. Hold on. Okay. So basically, what he said, and I am reading straight from the source. I think it's great for the state of Kansas, and it's great for college basketball, that being the Sunflower Showdown, the rivalry between Kansas and Kansas State. I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to really learn the history of this whole thing, right? And I know up until 1988, I think it was, that Kansas State had won more conference championships and went to more Final Fours with, you know, all of that. And so I know there's rich history there, and I listened to people talk about how great it was to go to the conference tournament and games against Iowa State and the games against Kansas were so close and competitive, and just how much their fans lived that. I could go on, but there's really not much else in terms of context clues that you need. That's basically the full quote. And I am not saying that just because I am a KU basketball fan. Um, I think Jerome Tang needs a bit of a fact check in terms of the pre 1988 history of the rivalry and of Kansas State basketball. Uh, I'm gonna be frank here. I think, yeah, it was taken out of context, and this is a guy that only just got to K State. I think you need to learn a little bit more about the rivalry, though, in order to make comments such as that. Um, yeah, again, I don't think he meant any ill will by it or was pretending to be right in any way. I think it was just through hearsay that he kind of learned this, and I think that's a little bit of the Bruce Weber that is left over in this Kansas State program. It's wrong. It's a wrong statement, first and foremost. Kansas has always been the better basketball school. There really hasn't been a time that Kansas State has been better for at least a long period of time. I'm talking multiple seasons, through decades. There really wasn't ever a time that Kansas State outclassed Kansas. Um, I think this is a comment based on ignorance, or not ignorance, I shouldn't say, misunderstanding more than ignorance, and just outright, you know, straight up lying from Jerome Tang. I really don't think he meant any ill will. I don't think he meant anything by it. I think it is Kansas State hearsay that kind of made him say this comment. We saw it a lot with with Bruce Weber, and maybe there is a bit of leftover leftover propaganda, I should say, regarding this issue. Again, if you look back at certain stats in the Big Eight, yeah, there's certain articles that you can point to and certain things that say, oh, well, Kansas State, as you can see, is top of the top of the conference. You got to date those facts, though. I mean, who ended up on top of the conference? Who ended up on top of the Big Eight? On top of who ended up higher in the rankings? And if we look further into that, most of the time it's Kansas. Um, if that weren't the case, then Kansas State would be a blue blood and Kansas would not. Kansas has more of a history of national championships. K State's really only been to, I think, who are. I may be wrong. I may be drinking the KU Kool Aid too, as much as Jerome Tang drank the K State Kool Aid. But overall, you look at the history and the winning of this KU basketball program, and you look at K State as well, and it just doesn't compare. I mean, one program hangs banners for NITs, the other hangs banners for national championships. And frankly speaking, a program that was better than the latter program at the former program, if they were better than the latter program at any point, would not hang banners for NITs. They would be considered a blue blood. And guys, a lot of y'all were alive pre 1988. A very large portion of y'all were alive during 1988, and yet there are still people out there that believe K-State was better than Kansas pre-1988. It's just not true. I mean, you can be as diehard of a K-State fan as you want, but facts are facts. And when we look at the cold hard facts, KU has been better. I'm not saying a whole lot better, like they're not leaps and bounds better, but I mean you look at the basketball record between KU and K-State, and that's already a you know, clear cut proof. So it's kind of it was a quote that I think was made out of misunderstanding rather than ignorance, but it's still a quote that is wrong and that Jerome Tang should really walk back before he, ticks off the wrong people. But speaking of that K-State program, they're doing really well this year, all things considered. They're top 10 in the nation for the first time since I think like 2017. So that's a great spot to be in with a first year head coach and a team full of transfers. I mean, I if I am K State, I am not complaining at all. I am not worried about KU and how they're doing at all. I'm worried about how they're doing. I'm worried about how we're doing. And I think we still see a lot of the little brother syndrome with Kansas State's fans. I think a lot of them don't understand where Jerome Tang is coming from in terms of, hey, I want this to be for us, not I want the cheering to be for us, not against the other team. And what he means by that is enough of the feeling of being the underdog because we're not. And Kansas State really isn't anymore. In terms of this year's Big 12, I mean, they're top of the conference. They're in that top echelon, and they need to start acting like it. And I understand, it's been a while, and K State fans have always been pretty rowdy. Um, but overall, I think there needs to be some sort of grace when it comes to K State fans in basketball. I don't think you're a dumpster fire program. You never have been. I mean, even when you were bottom echelon of the Big 12, you were still good. You were still knocking off opponents as good as Texas and KU for that matter, but or at least hanging with them at least. But overall, this is a new look K State team, and they need to start acting like a new look K State team. And they've had ups and downs these past couple of weeks. That close loss to Texas hurt, but it doesn't take them out of Big 12 title contention, especially if KU can come away with a win on Monday against Texas. But overall, I think K State's in a great place right now. I think they're setting themselves up to be a really good 2 or 3 seed. And depending on how the Big 12 finishes out, honestly, the top of the Big 12 will very well could be a 1 seed and the top overall seed at that. I mean, it is such a tough conference. Basically, every single team is in that top 40, and every single team has the ability to beat one another. And that's what makes the Big 12 so great is the fact that it's anybody's game, and it's really very fun to watch. So, if it weren't for the referees, but we'll get into that later. Um, but in terms of K-State's upcoming games, let's have a look here real quick. I know they've got some meat and potatoes of the Big 12 schedule left. It's not super duper tough, but yeah, they got TCU on Tuesday, so that's going to be a good game. They got yeah, and again, the Big 12's a Thunderdome, so anybody can beat anybody. I don't want to say um, K-State's just going to breeze through this remaining schedule because they won't. Every game is going to be a test. So, but starting with the remaining schedule, TCU, which is another team that is making a run towards that Big 12 title. They're ranked 15th. K State's going to be at home, though, and they need to show that they can beat a very, very good defensive team in TCU. I mean, we saw what they did to Kansas. And if they can do that to Kansas in their own building, they can do that to K State, too. So K State's got to be on their toes. And then after that, it gets easier, but it's Texas Tech. And yeah, Texas Tech, is one of the worst teams in the Big 12 right now, but that's not saying much. Um, they're still a very good team that has hung with the big boys for the entire season, really. I mean, I don't think they've been blown out once this year, like truly embarrassed at any point during the season. So again, that's another team to be on the lookout for. And then Oklahoma, and then you got Iowa State, which Iowa State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State is the remaining schedule. That's a tough, tough final three games. We saw what Oklahoma State can do. We've seen what Baylor and Iowa State can do, and it's time for K State to finish strong if they want any chance at that Big 12 title. So I expect them to do so. I think they'll show everything they've got and to win that Big 12 title. But um, like I said, the Big 12's tough. So moving away from the Big 12 for at least a moment, going to Mizzou. So Mizzou took a pretty bad L against a pretty meh Mississippi State team. And that does not look good if Mizzou expects to be competitive for the SEC. They've taken a lot of bad shots this past January. That loss to Florida was tough. Obviously, that loss to Mississippi State yesterday wasn't exactly good for the record. Um, and so, hold on just a moment. Give me just a moment here. I gotta find Missouri's game. Where's Missouri's game? I could have sworn they played. Huh. Oh, that's why. Hold on. Hold on. I gotta look up Mizzou's remaining schedule here. There you are. So yeah, Mizzou, they got a good win against LSU at home, and then proceeded to get just flapped around by a pretty average Mississippi State team. Um, and they're 17-6. It's still a record that deserves some credit, especially where they were last year. Um, but it's time to kick it into high gear for Missouri if they expect to, number one, make a run at the SEC, and number two, place well in the tournament. Um, they've got a pretty bad South Carolina team up next. That should be a good tune-up game for them. Um, they need to win that game convincingly because next they got number two Tennessee, and they're going to be away at Tennessee for that. And Tennessee's had some scares. They're vulnerable and they're not indestructible, but they are the number two team in the nation for a reason. And they're very, very good. And if Mizzou can come away with a win there, I think that is a huge confidence booster, and that'll get you through those final four games, and will get you through the SEC as well. Um, you know, it, they're two games back from Tennessee. It's not like Missouri is out of the SEC race. They are plenty in it still. They just got to start winning, and they got to start winning big. They got Auburn after Tennessee. Auburn's again another away game. Texas A&M for a revenge game, another revenge game against Mississippi State, and then they got Georgia to cap off the season. So It's going to be a test. The SEC is very similar to the Big 12, except there's less good teams. Um, there's a lot more dumpster fires like South Carolina. Um, but it's still nothing to play with. And Missouri has to win out in order to have any shot at the SEC. Um, but in order to place well in the tournament and have that good standing of like maybe a 6 or 7 seed, at worst, because I think they'll make the tournament. I don't see them not making the tournament. They'll win at least. They'll win at least 3 of the last 6 games. I think they'll be at least 50% in the last 6 games. Um, but if they're not, it's going to be a tough time in the NCAA tournament. I expect them to, if they lose out, which is not likely, then they're probably not going to make the tournament. But if they win those last three and they're 20-10 at the end of this regular season and do well in the SEC tournament, then expect a 7, 8, or 9 seed. If they win out and do well in the SEC tournament, they could go as high as a 4 or 5 seed, even. Um, it all just depends on what Dennis Gates guys, what Missouri team shows up, because we've seen Missouri be incredible this year. They've throttled highly ranked teams, but then they've also lost against average teams like Florida and Mississippi State and Texas A&M too. So in the end, Missouri has to find its identity and they have to find it quick in order to place well in the tournament. And I think this Missouri team is very dangerous if they are hot. And if they get hot in time for March, expect them to clean up. So, um, pretty good showing from first year head coach Dennis Gates, and again, pretty transfer heavy roster. Um, Mizzou and K State have very similar seasons. K State's a little bit more successful, but um, still pretty similar seasons. And that first year head coach is just turning that program around. I mean, this is a far cry from what that Missouri team was a long time ago, as in last year. um, but going on to KU, back to the Big 12. Golly. Ooh, that loss yesterday was bad. After a couple of confidence boosting wins against Kentucky and K State, KU showed probably their worst performance they've shown all year against Iowa State. Couldn't catch a rebound to save their life. Had to depend on Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson again. And just overall, just looked awful. I mean, I get it. It's Hilton and it's Iowa State, one of the best defensive teams in the country, but I mean, it was just abysmal. And part of that's on coaching, part of that's on it's the Big 12 being the Big 12. Um, it's fair to say that the Big 12 is just a super tough conference, and KU is just you know having their good games and having their bad games, but if you're a blue blood like KU, you have to be able to persevere and you have to be able to win those games, those must win games. Because this Iowa State game could have put KU back in first place. I mean, it absolutely could have. And if they get a win over Texas on Monday, it'll do the same thing. Um, Barring that, teams like Iowa State that are back in the saddle, even though we thought they would regress after losing to guess who? Missouri. Um, it, again, there's just so much inconsistency in college basketball this year. I mean, it's kind of turned upside down on its head in terms of who's good and who's not, and just who's struggling to get those marquee wins and who isn't. So overall, I think KU has to win on Monday. They play Texas on Monday at Allen, I believe. Let me clarify that. Let me clarify. Oh, there. Yep. KU's going to be at Allen. They're 3.5 point favorites. It's still going to be tough because KU was a 1.5 favorite over Iowa State and ended up losing by 15. So KU has to show what they're made of. They have to be at their best basketball for these last 7 games. I mean, they have to. Otherwise, yeah, they might look like the most dangerous 4 seed ever, but I think a 4 seed is absolutely unacceptable for how much talent you have on this team. Um, I know that, it's March, anything can happen. KU could run the table in March, but that doesn't happen. March doesn't happen until February happens. I know that's a very stupid thing to say because, duh, but in the scope of college basketball, you have to get through February. I mean, February is the meat and potatoes of your schedule. It is crunch time for college basketball programs. And for KU, it does not get any easier. They have a very tough stretch ahead. They got, it feels like this is the same old song and dance for the end of January. But KU's got Texas at home, like I said. They got an away game against Oklahoma. They got an away game against Oklahoma State, two teams that they've struggled with, mind you. At home, mind you. Um, then they got Baylor at home, away at TCU, um, West Virginia at home, and Texas Tech at home to close out. So at least those two closing games are going to be, super easy, right? 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 You hey, you cannot take any game for granted, and they cannot rest their hopes on the shoulders of Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick. It simply cannot happen. Uh, everybody's got to be on the top of their game, and by everybody, I mean everybody. What we saw against Kentucky and K State was a prime example of everybody playing for each other, and there wasn't any dependency on other guys like Jalen and Grady to carry the team. I mean, seriously, it's looked like it's 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 looked so inconsistent. I mean, one day KU's playing with all cylinders firing, the next it's Jalen Wilson's got 30 points, but the rest of the team can't even muster up a field goal. So it's it's crunch time, and I think Bill Self knows that. I hope, because there's been some coaching mistakes as of recent. Um, Bill Self's a great coach, but he's been kind of cold as of late. So I'm hoping that turns around. I hope he can get this team turned around, and I hope by March, KU is back to being this national title contender that they were predicted to be. Um, if Jalen Wilson continues to play how he plays while having help, then absolutely they will. But if we saw what we saw against Iowa State for these final 6 or 7 games, KU's going to have a real tough time. Even it's going to be ugly. Yeah, I frankly think that KU doesn't quite have to hit the panic button yet, but it's a problem that needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved soon. So anyway, Bill Self talking about, oh, it's like a Morgan here. Like, what happened during the post game presser against Iowa State? Well, yeah, because that was the ugliest loss of the season so far. So it's got to get turned around. And I have faith that it will, but KU is just one of those teams this year that it's feast or famine, and that's just not feasible in today's college basketball world. So, anyways, and one more thing I wanted to mention about college basketball. I wanted to talk about the referee article that they put out. Um, I firmly believe that, as a former official myself, um, officials are human and make mistakes. But what we've seen in college basketball as of recent is a complete disregard for the spirit of the game, um, from the officials. I think what we've seen is officiating crews that either get rattled by the hostile home crowds. Um, they have some sort of inconsistency with how the rules should be called. Um, or C, it's just a matter of, just humans being humans and the referee culture that we have as a society. And I think that third point is definitely one that doesn't get talked about enough. I think as a society, we have a referee problem. Um, as a sports society, I should say. And it goes from youth all the way to professional. The reason there's such a lack of solid officiating is because the solid officiating is getting scared away by the attitudes of fans, coaches, players, and personnel. Um, there has to be a culture change, and I'm guilty of yelling at the refs. I'm guilty of kind of being punk towards them. But in the end, they're human beings. In the end, they're going to call what they see. In the end, they deserve respect, because they would not have gotten to the level that they are at if it were not for them being a good professional referee. And I agree as much as the next guy that there has to be some sort of change in college refereeing. I think it is abysmal what we are seeing. I think from both referees, but also from media pundits, players, personnel, etc. I think there is a hostile culture when it comes to officiating, and it's going both ways now because yeah, well, the refs are making it all about them. They're making it all about them. Well, unfortunately, when the basis of refereeing is consistency based on quantity of calls rather than the quality of calls, yeah, that's what you're gonna get is you're gonna get a lot of BS fouls that don't actually exist to balance out how many calls there are on each team. You know how to prevent that? By disciplining your team, by making sure your team has good discipline and follows the rules of the game. So rather than completely blame officiating, I think officiating is at fault a little bit. I think it's kind of just being a bad actor at this point. But eh, there's a reason for that. And overall, people need to look inside themselves and say, "Hey, like this is just a game. This is." And frankly speaking, these guys have worked for decades refereeing this sport, so you have to trust them, and you can't rattle them. You can't eh, just be a turd to them because they'll be a turd right back to you. I mean, you got to understand that the official is the official. It's the judge of the game. They're the judges of the game. And if you're going to go off on them, at least make it justified. You can't go off and say, oh, well, there's 13 fouls against us, but only 6 against them. What's up with that? Well, it's because your team is terribly disciplined. cure the discipline issues. I get it. Physical basketball and is what it is, and some referees let teams play while others don't. But you should recognize that to begin with and prepare for it, because unfortunately, yeah, referees are a part of the game. They shouldn't impact the game in terms of the outcome, but when we're calling fouls based on quantity and not quality, yeah, they're going to impact the game. So just get it out of your heads that it needs to be fairly called when it already is, more or less. But also at the same time, yes, there needs to be some sort of change when it comes to especially college basketball officiating. So, just a short little aside for that. We're gonna get into the Royals next, so stay tuned. Anyways, talking about the Royals, um, KC Royals doesn't look like there's been a whole lot of organizational change, or at least as much as they say there is. Um, you know, I'm still bitter about that Chapman signing. I think it is one of the worst signings the Royals have ever had, and honestly speaking, I hope that he gets cut in spring training because, frankly speaking, I don't think he deserves another shot. I don't. To be brutally honest, I don't think he deserves a shot to play professional baseball ever again. Um, and whether or not the allegations against him were true, it doesn't matter because honestly speaking, the remorse he showed throughout, or the lack thereof, is pretty self-explanatory. This guy's not a good dude, and he's not a good pitcher. So I don't understand the signing. But signing that I do like is bringing back Zach Greinke. I think getting Greinke under a competent pitching staff will be a huge help. Yeah, he's old. Yeah, he looks kind of washed up last year. Um, but he still has that talent there. And I think to give him the last couple years of his career, to give him a good stint in Kansas City is very important for both the Royals and for Greinke. I think it's important for the Royals because it shows that they're committed to players. I think the Royals have had a huge commitment issue when it comes to their young players for sure, but also their older players. I think Salvador Perez has stuck around for so long and Alex Gordon stuck around for so long because they were the yes men, the guys that the Royals front office like. And it's not exactly how professional baseball works. You don't have to like a guy to keep them on your staff because i- that guy's good. If that guy's good, you keep him on the staff. And in the case of Mike Moustakas, Lorenzo Kane, um, a couple of others that I'm forgetting the name of, but the Royals have a commitment issue with their guys, and I think that shows at least a sign of hope. Signing Greinke shows at least a sign of hope that the Royals are willing to spend money on guys that will be program guys and that will help this team in the long run. And I think Greinke has every opportunity to help this team in the long run, especially with how young of a pitching staff this Royals pitching squad is. Um, there's going to be a lot of influence there and a lot of mentorship opportunities from a guy that's been around the block. So I think that's the first good move the Royals have made all offseason. A lot of them have been pretty meh or Chapman level. So, like I said, I'm still skeptic about how this Royals team is going to do and what kind of team they're going to be this year. And the comments made by John Sherman certainly don't help. John Sherman, when asked about the long term solution for the Royals, was pretty to the point by saying, we want to be good now, not 4 or 5 years from now. Well, John, unfortunately, my man, you're dealing with the team that's in rebuild mode. The chances of this team being good this year are pretty slim. Like playoff level, yeah, are pretty slim. Serviceable, there's there's a good shot. They may even make the postseason. I highly doubt it, but it's to say something like that, to kind of say, well, I don't care about, the long term, I care about the short term, is is pretty pedantic, honestly, and shallow. And yes, I quoted Family Guy. Stop. But it's shallow and pedantic because I actually know what those words mean, unlike Peter Griffin. Um, but what we're seeing is an owner that doesn't see baseball, he sees business. And, a guy that sees business is good to a point, but that general of an outlook and that shallow of an outlook is, and maybe it's taken out of context, maybe, but it's not a good sign in terms of management. Because frankly speaking, you should care about the long term. That's how teams like the Astros got to be good. That and cheating, but they built a young core and they explored the long term solution. And I think, yeah, the Royals have been a wait and see franchise for since 2015. But overall, what you have to look at as a franchise, if I am John Sherman, yeah, I'm not the GM. That's JJ Piccolo's job, which, oh my God. Why didn't he get fired either? Come on. Um, I digress. But yeah, I'm not the GM. I should care about the long-term future of this team. I should care about the young core of this team that, is not fully developed yet. This is going to be a development year for that young Royals core. And John Sherman has to recognize that. This team is not going to be immediately good. They're not. I mean, you've got an aging Salvador Perez. You've got the stars that you do have are aging and past their prime. So what you have to focus on is that young core and that long-term solution in order to win World Series down the line and have to drum up enough interest for a downtown park. Uh, because if you don't have that interest and if you don't have that fan engagement, what's the point? There has been so much apathy for this Royals team for so long because of actions like this, because of apathy from the owners themselves, that it's caused the huge disconnect between the Royals fan base and the ownership. And until that's resolved, you're going to have a team that hardly anybody cares about. And that's not going to be good because of that lack of care and that lack of in the complete takeover event or of empathy. So I think those comments were, you know, taken out of context or not. I think those comments were very shallow, and I think they were wrong. John, you got to know baseball if you're going to be a baseball owner. I mean, and frankly speaking, that sounded like a very business like answer. I mean, very general, very political of just, oh, we want to be good immediately, or we're going to be good immediately. Um, that's, it doesn't take a genius to see that that's not the case. So, in terms of the Royals, I think, again, this is going to be a building year for them. It's going to be another probably tough year. You know, everyone that's expecting the Royals to be good, don't get your hopes up. Um, watch them go all the way to the World Series now that I've said that. But I wouldn't get your expectations too high, especially after the moves that we've seen so far and the comments that we've seen so far. I think they've got good management there and they've got a great young core, but it's about keeping that management together and it's about keeping that young core together and not letting the higher ups that probably should have been fired a while ago, JJ Piccolo, um, not letting them get in the way. You got to work with what you got. I mean, and fortunately for the Royals, working with what you got has gotten us to this point. So, do I think Mike Matheny was a bad manager? Absolutely. Do I think Kyle Eldridge should not have coached pitching at all? Absolutely. But who put them in charge? Who was the one that fired our old pitching coach? I think his name was, oh, David something. David something. I can't remember. Um, but back in 2016, um, the pitching coach that put together one of the greatest rotations in Royals history was fired. For Cal Eldridge. I mean, you got to look at the bigger picture. It's not, the middle management's fault. It's the upper management. And with comments like these, you're seeing what's what exactly is wrong with the Royals, and what has been wrong with the Royals. The small market excuse is no longer an excuse. It's time to do better. So that's all I'm going to say about the Royals for now. Obviously, spring training starts in just a couple of weeks, and we'll be able to make better judgments from there. So I'm excited about watching the Royals. I mean, I love baseball, but the Royals make it hard sometimes. So, all right. Now, starting with the Chiefs. Now, good, well ran franchise in Kansas City. Um, Obviously, the Bengals. We're going to the Super Bowl. If you don't know that right now, they got pretty beat up along the way. All things considered, though, obviously Patrick Mahomes was throwing on one leg that whole game, but God love him, he showed out, and the defense too showed out. Um, and what we saw was arguably the most complete the Chiefs have looked in quite some time. Um, they need to bring that, excuse me, once the Super Bowl comes around. Um, the Eagles are not a team to be trifled with. They're a very good squad. We've seen how good they are. If you've watched any of the any Eagles game, you see a good squad. You can say that, oh well, they haven't played any good quarterbacks. They've played questionable defenses and blah 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 blah. Excuse. Ray of hope, ray of hope. And yeah, those are points to be talked about, but overall, this is a pretty even Super Bowl. All things considered, this is an explosive offense going up against an explosive offense, um, and this is a growing and this is a growing defense versus a growing defense. You've got a lot of guys on each defense that are coming into their own, that are becoming superstars, and that have shown how good they can be. And I mean, you look at the stats, it's pretty even down the line. Um, yeah, Patrick Mahomes has more passing yards and blah, 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 blah. But in terms of offensive efficiency, it's pretty close. And in terms of defensive efficiency, it's pretty close. Um, and the numbers don't lie. Yeah, you can say, well, the toughest quarterback that the Eagles ever had to play was Trevor Lawrence, and blah, 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 blah. Those things matter. I agree with you. But you have to look at the numbers, you have to look at the statistics, and you have to look at the efficiency of both teams. That is how you get the best gauge on each squad. And again, it looks pretty even. I think each team's got as good of a chance to beat the other. And that's why the line is so close. Um, do I have faith that the Chiefs will win? Absolutely, I do. Because of the Chiefs. And they've been here before. And in that, I think that's the X factor, honestly, is that you have guys like Patrick Mahomes, like Chris Jones, like, um, you know, oh gosh, who else? Miko Hardman, and others that have been here before, that have seen these bright lights before. You don't have a whole lot of that with the Eagles. You've got a couple guys like Jason Kelsey that have, and a couple others, which that's a fun little story. Kelsey versus Kelsey. That's cute and whimsical and quirky and fun. Um, but it's cool. To be Donna Kelsey right now, I am sure she is just riding life on cloud nine right now. I mean, it would be incredible to have two sons facing off in the Super Bowl. That's crazy. Um, but I digress. It's going to be a tight game, and in order for the Chiefs to win, that defense has to play how they played against the Bengals. They have to tight. They have to be tight. They have to be concise. They cannot give up the big play. And they have to get pressure on Jalen Hurts, and that's going to be tough with an offensive line that is much, much better than the Bengals' offensive line. Um, it's one of the best offensive lines in the league, and that's why Jalen Hurts has so many rushing yards. That's why Jalen Hurts has all the time in the world to throw the ball too, is because of that stellar offensive line. This is not going to be an offensive line full of holes. Like I know that there are a few Eagles starting offensive linemen that are injured. And unfortunately, one of them was charged for rape. I don't think he started, but either way, it, it's it's tough to say that the Chiefs pass rush will have as much of an impact that it did against the Bengals, because honestly, it probably won't. I think how the Chiefs win this game is that they set a spy for Jalen Hurts and don't let him get anywhere near 5 yards a rush like he normally gets. Um, and don't let guys like AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and others on that Eagles wide receiver crew get open. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith have both dominated, and they dominated a very good 49ers defense. this is going to be a tough game. I think a lot of people are underestimating the Eagles because they had, kind of an easier schedule. Um, but that's just not the case. This is still a very, very good squad that needs to be taken seriously. And to to have as many injuries, yeah, I know most of them are questionable. Unfortunately, Miko Hardman is doubtful. Um, to have that many injuries going into the week of the Super Bowl, there's going to be there has to be people that have to heal quick. And this isn't an example of, Terrell Owens playing on a broken leg. Like that can't happen anymore. Not just because there's a different view on masculinity and everything like that, but also because NFL trainers just straight up won't let that happen anymore, given the liability reasons and the problems with liability that they've had this year. But and I'm not saying people have to play injured in order for the Chiefs to win. That's just not the case. The Chiefs can win this game even if every single person on that injury report is listed as out. I I believe that. It just makes it a lot harder. And the Chiefs want to be at 100%. So I think the main keys are get as many people back from the injury report as possible. Have your linebackers spy Jalen Hurts all game, all game. Make sure your young defensive backs are in the same positioning that they were when guarding T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, which I think is a better wide receiver duo than A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So that's good. What that doesn't mean they're out of the woods, and that doesn't mean that Devontae Smith and um, AJ Brown are bad wide receivers because they are far from it. And overall, the offense just needs to not have as many hiccups as they did. They kind of sputtered out the second half. They were doing real well up until then. Well, relatively well, I should say. Um, but most of those injuries are on the offensive side. So injuries or not, they got to put up or shut up. And I think guys like Mikkel, or excuse me, not Mikkel, um, Marquez Valdez Scantling need to have big games. And depending on how many injuries there may need to be more big games from other less lesser wide receivers. Justin Watson's going to be back, so that'll be good. If he can catch the ball. And another X factor is Jody Fortson. Where's he going to fit in? And is he going to fit in? And overall, yeah, the Chiefs look beat up, but they have every shot to win this game. Whether nobody comes back from the injury report or everybody's fully healthy. So overall, it's looking pretty good. Um, I asked a poll question though of who was your breakout first year player and who was your breakout veteran of the Chiefs. Um, and a lot of those guys on that list are going to be key contributors in the Super Bowl. So let's just see who exactly we thought as the Vernon KC community. Um, let's see who y'all thought was did their best this year. That really broke out this year. Obviously, we're going to need a full team effort, but you know these key guys that y'all voted on will need as big of effort as everyone else, if not more. So let's have a look. So obviously that first question was which first year Chief had the biggest impact? It was a resounding vote for Isaiah Pacheco, and it wasn't close. Yeah, there was still 22% there for the rookie corners slash other, um, which other could have meant anyone from Justin Watson to this is a joke, but Rojo, Ronald Jones. But Isaiah Pacheco, I agree with. I mean, he had an incredible first year. I think the Chiefs have finally found their workhorse back, and he's going to have a big game because that Eagles pass defense is pretty good. Whether it comes to their pass rush or their corners, in Darius Slay and others, it's a tough team to throw against, and they're gonna be in your face all game. I mean, you've got Hassan Reddick versus Andrew Wiley, in this game, and Andrew Wiley's going to have a huge effort, um, not only in the pass game, but to give Isaiah Pacheco productive touches. Um, Isaiah can do it himself, yeah, but overall, you know, as the new Chiefs workhorse back, he's gonna have a lot, and he will need to have production, good production, if the Chiefs have any shot at winning this. So big time votes for Isaiah Pacheco there. I fully agree. So he's gonna have a big impact. He already has had a big impact, but he will have a big impact in the Super Bowl, if he's hot. So if he's the hot hand. Um, that second question was a little bit closer. Which chief from last year, or veteran chief, had a breakout year, and it was close. L'Jarius Sneed got 20% of the vote. Frank Clark and Jarek McKinnon, though, took 40% and 40%. No one voted for Colin Saunders slash other. Colin Saunders was kind of the dark horse in my opinion. I think he's had a great year, but not as great of a year as either McKinnon or Clark. I agree with that. Um, Frank Clark was a beast against the Bengals, and he's going to have to be a beast against the Eagles. And he can be because they're like Hassan Reddick and Andrew Wiley. There is a mismatch there. Lane Johnson's out, and he's that guard on that left side that would be blocking against Frank. Um, well, he's questionable, but they're leaning towards doubtful, is what I heard, at least. Um, and then as far as the tackle goes over there, I'll have to look, but I don't think it's anyone spectacular, that I can think of at least. Let me check though. Well, yeah, it's another injury. I think it's another. Is Jordan Mailata? Jordan Mailata's good, but I thought he was injured. He might not be. Well, I think he was on the injury report. Hold on. Let me have a look here. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, wow. He is not on the injury report. My apologies. Um, I thought Lane Johnson was the guard. This is confusing. Oh, Lane Johnson's the right tackle. So, in my opinion, you switch Frank Clark. My apologies. Landon Dickerson was the guy that I was talking about earlier. I got Landon Dickerson and Lane Johnson confused. My apologies. But in my opinion, you got Jordan Mailata on that left side. Switch Frank. Switch Frank over. Or let Karloftis run. Or that's the thing about this Chiefs defensive line is going to have a huge, huge, huge game, just like they did last time, against the Bengals. And the reason they had that big of a game is because they were constantly switching on that defensive front. They cannot be consistently putting people on certain sides unless there is that big of a mismatch. And I think if Lane Johnson ends up being out, or Landon Dickerson for that matter, if they're both out, that's huge. But overall, if they're both in, you're going to have to work with what you got. And I think Frank Clark lining up against Jordan Mailata will be beneficial over lining him up against Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson's one of the best tackles in the game. And, Jordan Mailata is good too. But overall, what we're looking at is we're going to have another big defensive front game from the Chiefs. So Frank Clark's going to have a huge impact, and he's already had a huge impact and a huge breakout year. As for Jarek McKinnon, he was kind of a late bloomer this season. Didn't have a whole lot going on those first couple of games, but come about the eighth and ninth game, he really hit his stride. And overall, he and Isaiah Pacheco have been a great tandem. And I think the Chiefs have finally found their two-headed beast again. Obviously, it's been a while since the likes of Jamal Charles have walked through Arrowhead. Um, but I think Jarek McKinnon, as kind of that Swiss Army knife player, has worked out miraculously for the Chiefs, especially against teams with good defensive fronts. So, like the Eagles, mind you. Um, but Derek McKinnon's going to have a big game as well. It's going to be an all hands on deck type of game. And I think it'll come down to the war being won in the trenches along those defensive and offensive fronts. And whoever has the best front seven, I think, wins. Um, you can talk all you want about the air game. Yeah, it'll play a part, but the game's going to be won in the trenches, in my opinion. So, overall, good pull, good pull. Did want to mention the comment that showed up that last slide there of my Blues rugby coach and passionate Raiders fan, uh, Derek Pearson, quoting uh, quoting him by saying Josh McDaniels' inability to coach in the second half was the the MVP of the season. Oh, we played the Raiders for 2 games, and Josh McDaniels can coach at all. Come on, be real, be real. Anyway, going into another team that was championship bound this past year. Uh, the KC Current. The KC Current have started their trainings. Season's coming up pretty quick, and they've had a few big name free agent signings. One of those being Brazilian, yeah, Brazilian international Dabina, who is was a key piece of that Brazilian women's team for a very long time, and she's looking to dust the wheels off a little bit um, when coming to the Kansas City Current. Not only that, they've got a few local talents that they signed in the draft. Um, a very good prospect in Michelle. The last name escapes me. My apologies. Media day. They had their media day today. Michelle Cooper. That's right. Michelle Cooper, um, which is another big name signing. She had quite a few goals and was a key contributor for her team last year, and will be a key goodness, a key contributor for her team this year, which is the Current, of course. Um, so that will be a big time watch, in my opinion. Um, the ground that they broke was more than just off the field. Um, this is a team that is another championship contender, a perennial championship contender at that. That Kansas City has, and will only further build the city of Kansas City into a sports franchise or a sports city. We already kind of are. I mean, if only the Royals were good. But it truly helps that we have such good soccer here, and to have such a marquee women's team that is just so good. I mean, it was unfortunate that they had that championship loss last year, but the fact that they even got there after only existing for a couple of years is gigantic. I mean, this is a new franchise that is already taking the league by storm, and they deserve your respect and your recognition. So go watch a game or two or three or all, and see what the team's all about. They're going to be better than they were last year. And the couple games that I went to last year were a blast. One of them, the Current didn't even win, and it was still just so much fun. I mean, it was such a great atmosphere for women's soccer. And I think what we see here in Kansas City is a city that loves soccer. I mean, you not only at the professional level, but at the grassroots level. I mean, you look at the youth programs that are around here for both men and women's soccer, and you see a very well-oiled machine. Um, that produces just so much local talent. Um, and whether that local talent plays for the Current or Sporting Kansas City or not, Kansas City has made its mark on the game of soccer and in the U.S. And you know it's it's fun to watch. So just go check out the Current. Go check out the Current. I'm planning on introducing my girlfriend to a Current game or two this upcoming season. So it's a great time. So go check them out. And our final topic of the evening. One of my favorite topics because I play it for this team. The Kansas City Blues. Kansas City Blues had their Hall of Fame banquet last night. Congratulations to Ashley Pouchet and Dan Cluth for being inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame. Much love to both of you guys. I know Ashley pretty well. He's on the exec board with me. Great guy, lots of knowledge, and very, very committed to the game. So well done to both of you. It was a great, fun night full of lots of great moments, whether that was at the Mule Box Suite at Boulevard Brewing or at the Grand Falloon at the after party. Lots of great memories that were made, and I appreciate that aspect of rugby and more. So if you're interested, talk to me or come talk to any one of my Blues brothers. It's a great sport to get involved in. You get to go to big fancy banquets at the Mule Box Suite in Boulevard Brewing. It was tons of fun. And it was great to see all the guys again. Training's starting back up uh, here this month, and it's a great sport to get involved in, and it's only growing further. And I can't wait to see where this exec board and the exec boards that will come after us what they'll do for the future of not only this program but rugby in Kansas City in general. Um, I'm talking, of course, about certain Blue River complex that is in the works. Um, if you don't already know, the Kansas City Blues are trying to build a permanent home over in Blue River Park. They've already been approved by Jackson County, and they're gonna be breaking ground here hopefully pretty soon. And to everyone that worked their butts off to make this happen, whether that be President Matthew Hoover or he had a little bit to do with it, not to toot my own horn or anything. Um, but or Chris George or many of the sponsors. I mean, a huge thank you because it only grows not only the Kansas City Blues but the game of rugby, and this is a game that deserves to be grown. So much love to the crew for that. But overall, pretty light spring schedule for the Blues. I think we only have like 6 games or something like that, 4 to 6, and then it will be off to summer seven season. Already got guys chomping at the bit for some starting spots for not only the spring but for summer and fall. So it's going to be a great way to kick off kind of the year for the Kansas City Blues, that spring developmental season, and we're going to see a lot of great talent. So get out and watch while you can. Um, but yeah, it was lots of fun. Thank you to everyone who took part and enjoyed our banquet. And yeah, much love. But anyway, that's our show. Special thank you to everyone that bared with me those 2 weeks that we didn't have a show. I figured having a late week show was kind of redundant, just because, what would I talk about today if I had done a show on Thursday? There really wasn't much happening in the sports world other than, a couple of college basketball games, and, the Pro Bowl that, no Chiefs played in. But overall, should be a pretty good show coming up this next Sunday. I'm, of course, talking about my special announcement. I will be doing a Super Bowl pregame show. I will be going live before the Super Bowl, um, and answering all your questions, doing a little bit of a Q&A, maybe a little bit of interview segments with a couple people that will be attending the Super Bowl party that I will be at, and just overall, gonna be a great time. They try and raise some money too. That might be announced later in the week. I don't know yet, but we'll see. That will be for a charitable cause, of course. Um, you know, Maybe. Uh, we'll leave that up to me at a later date. I just gotta kind of work things out here, in terms of what exactly I'd want to do if it were for a charitable cause. But if you can give at any point, do so. But that's our show. I appreciate all you tuning in, all of you great, awesome readers and watchers. Much love to each and every one of you. Thank you as always. Um, I know I've said this before, but we're starting to make headway in terms of getting this podcast on to Spotify and SoundCloud. I just need to learn how to convert audio files, from video and apply it to SoundCloud and Spotify, which that's probably going to be the easy part. The hard part is going to be converting audio files. Like I said, I am not a computer technician. Please bear with me. It will get done as fast as possible. But show's only going to get better from here. We are officially a month away from having a full year of the burn. Never did I thought I would get this far. Never did I think there would be so many people interested. Um, what I had to say sports wise. So again, many thanks to each and every one of you for making this possible. So, um, thank you. Have a great night. I will see each and every one of you next Sunday. And go Chiefs. This has been the Burn KC. Signing.